Hi there, everyone. Today I'm looking at Resident Evil 9. This was a very exciting game, especially for me, coming up because this was kind of the latest installment of the Resident Evil series, and there was just a lot of hype around it, and people were really looking forward to this one. And now that it's finally here, how do I feel about it? Well, it is a good game, but it's definitely far from perfect. And I think I'll just cut right into it, which is that the game is divided into Grace and Leon sections, with Grace being the more survival horror or more horror focus aspect, while Leon was more action focused. And so we kind of knew that coming out, but now that I've actually finished the game, it's just a very blatant, obviously glaring fact that Leon sections are incredibly fun, well designed, um, just incredibly good overall. And Grace is just not fun to play as at all. And so this would be I would give it a much higher rating or respect if it literally had no Grace levels. It was one of the few times where I definitely felt the game was too short, and I really wanted more of Leon's sections. I know they're probably going to do DLC. I'm sure they're going to add in a mercenaries mode eventually. But yeah, Leon is fantastic. Everything about Leon in this game is really fun, really cool, and even the design of his gameplay, his levels, his loadouts, the balance of all the other mechanics feels really good. It's just that he's only half the game, and the other half is just very boring. And I think it really boils down to, I think, in terms of a gameplay element, the idea or the fact that when you play as Leon, yes, it's more action oriented, which, I mean, it's definitely a benefit, but it's just the fact that you have a whole arsenal of different weapons. You have a hatchet, you have melee, you have ranged attacks, you have, collecting stuff and puzzles. And so overall in Leon's campaign, when you're actually playing as him, you just have so many different options. You see a zombie and you think, okay, I could shoot him in the legs and use a melee attack, or I could, seize him with a bunch of friends so I can throw a grenade, or maybe I'll, take him out with a sniper long distance, or use my shotgun and get up close because I have too much ammo for that. So there's a million things going through your mind when you're playing as Leon. But when you're playing as Grace, it's just super boring. And I think there could be ways to fix it. But when you're really playing as Grace, you're really waiting for a scripted animation to stop playing. You're waiting for the enemy to come and look at you and look scary, but there's not going to be a gameplay consequence. Well, I mean, there will be if you go right into it, but it's just waiting. It's just so much waiting as Grace, pretending to be scared of the thing that's in front of you, and then just waiting for it to move on, and then you can sneak around the corner, and then it hears you, and then you go back, and then you keep going. And yeah, it's like once you've done it once, I can't imagine going back and do it again. It even would be remotely fun. While Leon, it's definitely fun to replay those sections. And Grace as a character, she's fine. I mean, she's okay. She has this stutter, which is kind of characteristic for her, but she's also an FBI agent, and I guess an FBI agent with no field training whatsoever, because she's just a girl. Like she says she's FBI, but she's literally just a girl, and she is way in over her head, and that's why she has the stealth sections. I guess technically she does get kind of better later on, because then you have, like, for most of the gameplay, you have a gun and a knife, so it's a lot of stealth, it's a lot of sneaking around. It was kind of interesting, the last section of Grace's campaign, where you have a bunch of lickers and they can't see you, but they do react to sound. So that was kind of a cool switch up. So you also have things like bottles you can throw to distract enemies with sound. You can also create Molotovs and acid bottles, amongst a bunch of other array of different weapons. But that's really the extent of Grace's arsenal. So it's really, I don't know. I just found it to be incredibly boring and tedious, honestly. It was just a lot of waiting, and you don't have a lot of options. In fact, it was really painfully obvious near the end of the game, where you were playing a lot more as Leon, and you have like one more Grace section left, which is this flashback, essentially. And in that flashback, it feels like something out of honestly, some super cheap horror game from 2010 or 2013, like some FNAF tier oh, haunted doll children are coming for you, and you have to wait in a corner, and they look at you, but do they actually see you? It's so, oh my god, it's so derivative, uninspired, and it feels so forced into the game. And this really is, an aspect of this new trilogy of Resident Evils, because this is the trilogy of the trilogies. You'd add 1 to 3, which were tank control games. Then you had 4 to 6, which were kind of more over the shoulder action oriented. And with 7 to 9, they've done a more first person perspective. They changed up the whole main characters, and they tried to make them more vulnerable, and in a way more kind of hopping onto that whole fad that was happening in Western gaming with first person startling horror games where things jump at you like a fun house basically, and Slender Man and FNAF and all that group of or style of games. And because of that, it was always not very well received. Like, I didn't play 7 until years later because I just perceived it as just that. Thankfully, it was more than just a horror game funhouse simulator. But that element still is in the DNA of this latest generation of Resident Evil games. But that being said, I would say 9 might actually be my favorite of that trilogy, despite how short Leon sections are. Resident Evil 8, it was good, but the one thing I also noticed is that the tone is very, very different. And for 8, it was very dark, and it's also really dark here. And the only way I can describe this is that Resident Evil has always seemed to mimic or mirror the American movie market. So, for example, Resident Evil 2 feels less like a zombie survival story like 28 Days Later and more like Speed or something with Keanu Reeves. Or it resembles more of an action movie atmosphere, especially Resident Evil 2 and 3 to a lesser extent. They're kind of fun, exciting things like, oh, they're zombies, but that the whole horror element in 2 at least was very much downplayed. And in 3, it was just a full-on action game. So with Resident Evil 9, was it mirroring? Well, the current state of the movie industry is more similar to things like, I don't know, like really hyper depressing, darkly shot Netflix shows. So if Resident Evil 2 is something like Die Hard, then Resident Evil 9 is more similar to 7 by David Fincher. It is a very, very dark, depressing, and extremely gory game. And, Resident Evil, it's always had, a bit of gore here and there. And, there's an appropriate amount that I feel is necessary. And 9 feels just ridiculous amounts of gore. Like anything as gory, if gorier than Gears of War, needs to slow down a bit, and because it's just almost a little bit ridiculous. And I don't mean just in terms of the quality. Like there's one scene where because even back in Resi 4, okay, Leon can get his head chopped off by a chainsaw, but that was like, how do I say, that was like realistic. In this game, you have this special contraption as Grace called the hemoglobinifier or something. It does something with the blood cells. Anyway, if you inject it into one of the zombies, because they can come back as blister heads, which are red heads basically. If you inject it into a zombie as like a stealth attack, they will literally just explode. And so there was this one maid cleaning the bathroom, and I did it to her. And this once clean bathroom became entirely filled with blood. Like we're talking about comical levels of gore here. It's not just it's gross and disturbing. It's just it's a ridiculous amount. And to be fair, in 7 there was still kind of mold creatures, so it wasn't that graphic, I guess. They would just explode. In 8 there were definitely werewolves, and those things would be killed. With 9, especially in the first section, the zombies just look like people because they've been freshly turned and infected by Victor Gideon, who we'll get to, who's a pretty great villain. I'll be honest. He's not super complex, but his attitude and his aura is just very it's very tasty, if that's the right word. He feels like a good villain, and is a good villain. But yeah, there's just a lot of killing of people in this game that feels like you're not actually killing zombies. Later on, when you're playing a Leon section, it feels more like that. But in the beginning, it just has this really weird vibe. And like, there's this one scene where Grace's mother gets like, well, and this other guy, this secretary, gets killed by this serial killer. And like, it's supposed to be an assassination, but it feels like something out of some really dark show where some guy gets a plastic bag wrapped around his face and then a machete comes down and slices his neck. It just feels not like Resident Evil. It feels way too graphic and way too disturbing. And there's always been this conversation of horror and gore in the media and what is the right kind of balance to it. Because there are some, how do you say? There are some series I think start off this way and then resort to gore as kind of shock value because they run out of the actual creative juices that made them in the first place. And I think Saw is a good example of that. The original Saw, it is relatively gory, but it's this psychological situation the characters are in that are really, really interesting, and the whole crime and punishment aspect of it. And then it just became more of an emphasis on gore, as if there's some kind of gore market of people that will watch something just because someone gets wrecked in some really horrible way, which, besides it being partially disgusting or disturbing to the average person, it's just not very imaginative. It's just not interesting. It's like, okay, cool, that person got killed. I can go watch that on Live League, you know? But yeah, in Resi 9, there's definitely parts of that, but again, eventually it does get kind of better. Like when you get to the city section, all the zombies have kind of been in the ground, and so they're dusty, they're more skeletal. There's kind of like a design to them that says, oh yeah, it makes sense they would look this way. It's like world building in the zombies themselves. And it's just it's more interesting that way. There's also a good variety of different kinds of enemy types. You have it's actually funny. You have these really big fat guys that people have already started modding as Shrek, and apparently they're called chunks in the game, which I think is really funny. Yeah, but those are really great characters, or enemy types rather. You have the average zombie, which you can just shoot twice and do a melee attack, and it's fine. The main thing is that in Grace's campaign, again, if you leave them alone and you come back, maybe not the fifth time, but maybe the sixth or seventh time, they might resurrect. They turn into blister heads, so the T virus or whatever is still around, and it takes over and turns their head into this fungal kind of looking thing. But it's not a fungal thing; it's a virus thing. And you also have different types of zombies that still kind of retain aspects of their original personality, and it goes into more of the lore of Raccoon City and what Spencer was trying to accomplish with the T virus. And it's actually a pretty interesting idea that he thought that essentially the T virus would be a method or a means to transmit memory, which I found really interesting, that you could essentially extend your mind or your memory or your thoughts beyond the death of the body, which is kind of what his main goal was, which just seems kind of, in a way, more altruistic or more rationalized for the cost that would be necessary for such an endeavor. And there's also, aside from the new enemy types, there's also some new characters, Victor Gideon being one of them, one of these head researchers at Umbrella that kind of went underground, and he basically abducts Grace and Leona at one point, and so he's basically out to finish what Umbrella started, and he's after this thing called Elpis. And apparently, that's how really it starts. There's Grace is an FBI agent, and she's kind of a desk worker job, and she's looking to the series of killings, and she ends up getting ambushed at one of the crime scenes where she goes on site into the field, and she's being chased down, and her last name is Ashcroft, and so she obviously has ties, whether she knows it or not, to the Umbrella Corporation. And so Victor Gideon basically abducts her because he needs her for his for this thing called Elpis, which is the final thing that Umbrella worked on in Raccoon City. There's also a bit of retconning, which I'll be honest is a little bit dumb. There's this whole idea that Raccoon City wasn't nuked because of the zombie infestation, but that they were trying to essentially, what is it, use the explosion as a cover up for a secret lab that was beneath the city, which is just like, I mean, come on, guys. Like, you don't have to go that far to retcon the nuclear blast. I was also having a conversation with someone about this, that like there was some insistent deep lore that they used a thermonuclear bomb in one instance because it only destroyed people and not the buildings, which is funny because in the cutscene of Resident Evil 3, it shows all the buildings getting destroyed. But, whatever. You just kind of, there's always successive retcons that, are more acceptable than others. But, I mean, yeah, that is really one of the big, big aspects of this game, which is that Leon returns to Raccoon City. And so, yeah, basically that's mainly how the game is divided. Victor Gideon abducts Grace. She wakes up in this basically asylum, this abandoned asylum in the middle of like this town essentially, called Rhodes Hill. And she basically just has to survive the asylum. She finds these experiments on other children, and she finds this child called Emily, who she basically cares for and takes care of. And she kind of becomes the duo and the sidekick, while Leon, he shows up, and his kind of partner is Sherry. She's taken the role of kind of his info and tech support, and he's working for a new organization. We had Chris and BSAA who are also in this mentioned, and Chris is working. I'm sorry, Leon is working for a DSO, which I literally don't remember what it stands for, and I just played the game. But anyway, Leon's for his own organization. It's in the future. He's like 50. Chris is almost 50. I think he's over 50, but whatever. And he looks the same basically, but whatever. But yeah, Leon, he is dark, brooding. He still has a few of those one-liners, so he still kind of feels like the old Leon. But yeah, he is still in the same vein. But again, everything just feels a lot darker and again much more gory. So I mean, when Leon shows up, he's in downtown and he sees these people just being infected, and he just immediately starts blasting basically. And he also has a new thing, a hatchet. So he is an axe wielding maniac now, and I'll be honest, the gameplay is super fun. It is super fun, and it feels great. And of course, the main thing is that because the T-virus affects the brains of the zombies, Leon is constantly decapitating heads, and like I said about the ridiculous levels of gore, like even when he does a finisher on a zombie and he chops their head off, it's not enough to just chop their head off. It's that their head will also explode. It's just it's just there's action, and then there's action that just almost doesn't make sense. It's almost too unbelievable. But anyway, it's hyper extremely violent, but I'll admit, yeah, but definitely obviously very fun. It is funny though, Leon has a bunch of different melee finishers. Grace, when she shoots an enemy enough times, she can just do a little girl push and push them over to try and hope to finish them off. Yeah, Grace can really only fight one enemy at a time, and she doesn't have that much ammo or resources, obviously. But Leon is just pure action, and he's great to play as. He's still it's still classic Leon. He has his personality, his character. Definitely very buff. He does breaks windows and then does all that kind of good stuff and destroys a bunch of stuff. Yeah, Leon really steals the show. He's just so much cooler and better and his gameplay too. Fantastic. But anyway, yeah, Victor Gideon, he abducts Grace, starts this outbreak. Leon shows up, kills a bunch of guys, and then Leon tracks Grace down to this insane asylum where she's been held, and there's zombies everywhere. And Leon is tracking her down because he's after Gideon, I believe. And so things evolve, and finally, yes, it turns out that Leon returns to Raccoon City, and that's in the second half. And so after they escape the asylum, she's captured, and Leon's basically tracking her. So like I'll just be straight with it. Like the Raccoon City section is fantastic. It is phenomenal. It is, I would borderline say, almost a spiritual religious experience because Leon, in the hero's journey, he's returning, and the return is always like this big moment in any hero's story where he has to return to where it all started and where it all happened, and he's returning to the place that made him who he was. And I've just always liked that trope. I liked it in Assassin's Creed Revelation when Ezio returns to Masyaf, the original place of the assassins. And despite me not liking that game, I love the concept, and that was the whole thing about around that trailer and why that trailer was so huge. It's still one of my favorite trailers to this day with that music and everything. But yeah, not only that, but Raccoon City itself, it's so well designed as a level. You basically have an intro section where you're just kind of very linear, and then it opens up into this kind of not open world, because it does not really do open world. It's not does not embrace that philosophy. It's more like a open zone where you have three different areas you can go to, and you have to basically construct this bomb to open up the fence to continue further into the inner city. And just the setting is so interesting and eerie and creepy, where it's midday, and so it's during daytime, and it still feels super creepy because all the buildings have been blown out. There's no one around. Everything's disheveled, and you just have this sense of weight and purpose and impact, and this idea that at any time in any one of these buildings that seem abandoned, a horde of zombies could be waiting inside them. And you just have this feeling of tension and this feeling of apocalypse, and it's just such a cool setting. And it was the absolute highlight of the game. I mean, that alone, though, that level alone, which lasted maybe about 2 hours, was worth the entire price of the game. It was absolutely fantastic. Um, they also introduce a mechanic in that level in which you essentially are, how would I say? Unfortunately, there's no merchant in this game, but what they do have is you basically pick up this bracelet, which is this military bracelet, which tracks how many kills you have and gives you a bunch of points that you can use at a shop. So it's kind of like an in-world reason that Leon can spend points on upgrades and stuff at these military outposts, essentially. But yeah, that whole level is just, it's fun, it's fantastic. You have encounters, you have little so the in-lore reason is the BSAA went in there 3 years ago, and they basically tried to go into the city because they knew about the secret lab that they tried to breach, but they couldn't. And so there's reasons why there's actual equipment and pickups and modern ammunition lying around the place, because a military operation took place there. And you also find these weird packages that are being strung up on the buildings, which you can shoot down. They have supplies and goodies in them, little hidden things. There's also these hidden Mr. Raccoon bobbleheads, and they've made it a lot easier than the previous games where you'd have to just like keep your eye out. But now they actually make a sound when you're near them, and so my first playthrough I got like 21 out of 25. So they're fun little Easter eggs and collectibles you can pick up. Speaking of Easter eggs, the Raccoon City Police Department has at least 5 or 6 different Easter eggs in there, and a lot of them I stumbled across just by happenstance. For example, you'll have Tofu Jill just kind of walking around outside the police station, outside kind of the boundaries of the map, and then you can kind of find her and shoot at her, and apparently nothing will happen. I thought I would get an achievement, but nothing happened. There's also a scavenger hunt from Barry, and I have to admit, I wasn't expecting this to get me so much, but when you walk into the Raccoon City Police Department, it plays like, obviously a newer version, but there's a leitmotif of those first like 3 or 4 notes from the original Resident Evil 2, and that just got me. It is important to note though that a lot of the, I don't want to say lore, but a lot of the flashbacks and lore for the Raccoon City Police Department are more so based on the remake of 2 than the original. For example, Mr. X appears at one point, and you're like, oh, okay, this is very much in line with the remake they did rather than the very original. But there's still, I mean, everything is still reference. I mean, yeah, the other thing too is, of course, the puzzles are they feel a lot less. I mean, maybe even than 8, for example. Well, no, I can't really say that. I mean, I think just Grace has more of the puzzles. Like, there's one where you're in this mine shaft and you have to take these power cells and move them around, and you have to get all three so you can unlock the doors and get, Emily out of there. And I guess I'll talk a little bit about later in the game. Just the game was doing a lot of really cool stuff, and then at the ending, they did a few couple things that were just kind of dumb. But there's also a new character who is called Zeno, and he's very obviously like Wesker, but not Wesker. So because we were all saying, is Wesker ever going to come back? But no. And so Zeno is kind of this sort of Wesker. He seems to be a clone. It's never really defined exactly what or who he is, but he just looks cool as hell, and he is called a cheap imitation. So it's obviously he's probably a clone. Along with Grace, it turns out that also Grace has a bunch of clones, which I totally called. Like within the first few hours of seeing Grace and these other characters, I'm like, okay, they look similar. So I definitely called that one. But yeah, near the end of the game, it wraps up pretty nicely. I think it's the first Resident Evil that ends without a sunrise. I just kind of was like doing this tally of the other games, but yeah, there's that to it. Yeah, they do this really dumb thing at the end of the game, which I'm just going to talk about, which is that the character Emily has such a really great ending to her story, and they just double back on it immediately at the end, where basically it turns out that she's alive and fine after turning into a monster and being killed. And it was Leon's like, oh yeah, don't worry, I didn't hit any of her vital organs. I'm like, yeah, but you still killed the monster. And then it pans over the monster, and she's just inside the corpse, and she's just totally fine. And then the game ends with like a frame picture of Grace adopting Emily, and it's just like the whole emotional impact of that scene was completely taken away. It's like, oh, okay, I guess they're fine then. They just keep this mutant daughter. Like, I thought what they were gonna do, and I was really surprised that didn't happen, is that when you first meet Emily, she's in a dual cell. There's another cell there, and she says her friend is Mary. And so I thought, okay, cool. Mary's gonna come into the story at some point. She never comes into the story. I thought even at the end they'd be like, oh, well, Emily might have died, but at least we have Mary that we can take care of or something. But no, that never happens. And I just thought, oh, okay, you're going to just make this character magically come back because you just really, really want it. It was such lazy writing. It was really, really lazy. And then there's also the big twist at the end as to what exactly Elpis is, which is essentially a vaccine, an antiviral that essentially heals the T virus. They were never able to synthesize it in the last, I guess, 20 plus years. And so Spencer basically kept it hidden in this super secret underground lab. And so the motivation of the main villain is to use Elpis to basically weaponize it to destroy all the BOWs and cause chaos, I guess. So okay, I guess. But the real scene that also just really irked me is when you release the Elpis vaccine, when Grace releases it, the very first thing this not Wesker Zeno guy does is he injects it into himself, thinking it's another virus, thinking he can evolve and become stronger by using it. And immediately after putting it in, he immediately realizes, oh, wait, I don't feel so good, or I feel like less powerful. And she injects it into Leon, minutes after, saying, oh, wait, it's an antiviral. And so in that moment, the one Wesker character just loses all his powers and gets himself killed immediately by another guy just because he's like, oh, cool, rare vaccine. I'm just going to jab and see what happens. And he just immediately dies. It was like, It's like that was kind of really dumb that he just like basically killed himself, uh, almost in that scene. So, and if you choose to destroy Elpis, then well, um, this Xeno guy straight up just kills Leon, just murders him right in front of Grace, and it's very gory. That's everything in the game is. But there's really only two things near the end of the game that I thought, okay, this is kind of dumb. But yeah, I love Xeno. I love his fit. I love how he looks. He's a really cool character. He doesn't even have to say anything. He just looks cool. And yeah, so no, the Raccoon City section is absolutely peak. You have again three sections where you have to get these three pieces of this bomb. One is in this kind of like crumbling, destroyed skyscraper that's leaning on its side. That was so cool. You have this section where you can shoot the glass windows, which are now a floor, to make zombies drop through. Just so cool. You have another section where you kind of go to this gas station and you have to use a chainsaw in this giant, gasoline firefight. Oh, it's so cool. And the last one is this thing where you have the zombies shooting mortars at you, and you have to run from house to house or rubble to rubble. It's actually very cool. So that whole section is just absolutely fantastic. And then you have a motorcycle sequence, and then Leon ends up, going through this like underground section, and he goes to a secret lab, and he's fighting lickers and zombies, and oh, it's so good. And Grace's sections just suck. It does appropriately, or feel like a different game, but I thought they were gonna restore this idea that everything that Grace goes through that takes maybe half an hour or an hour, Leon does it in 20 minutes, so he just goes through and rampages over everything. But it was very fun to play as only Leon in a just very well made section. Just so well made. Oh my god. And it does feel very spiritual too. It feels like the world has stood still. It feels like Raccoon City is this unholy place where the origin of everything started, and you're just returning to this place and almost reconnecting with who you are, how it made you essentially, and how it made Leon who he was. So it's just a fantastic sequence, and again, it totally justifies everything else. But it is kind of unfortunate that when people talk about replaying a game and they think, oh god, I've got to do that part. It's unfortunately the first half of the game. The entire first half of the game is just Grace running around, crying, being vulnerable, waiting, and pretending to be scared of things. It is stressful with resources and stuff. It is stressful with how little things you have to work with, but I wouldn't necessarily call it fun, and that's the main issue, honestly. The Leon sections I could replay day and night. They're so good. They're so much fun. I honestly need more of them. And again, like I was saying, that it's weird that this game doesn't have a mercenaries mode, because 7 had a mercenaries mode. 7 had a bunch of weird multiplayer modes, like the birthday Uncle Birthday for Jack mode. 8 had some pretty decent, I don't think it had different modes, but it had a very decent mercenaries segment to it. The DLC only added crazy characters like Dimitrescu, which are just ridiculously fun to play as. She has one move where she throws an entire armoire. She just manifests an armoire to throw. It's like some friggin' Smash Brothers stuff. It's ridiculous, and I really love it a lot. But so I was surprised. Yeah, 9 doesn't have a default mercenaries mode, unless I'm missing something. So I really, really hope they add it, because I want to play more as Leon. I want to use his sick ass loadout and play more of that, because it's so much fun. But yeah, overall, I'm happy with the new characters of Gideon and Xeno. They're very cool. They're very competent. Grace, I don't hate her or anything, but I just have I have nothing good to say about her either. She's just a stuttering, girl that's just way in over her head. And then even Emily is okay. She's like, oh, I'm also a girl that needs help. and I'm blind. It's like, okay. I was kind of hoping that would like come into some gameplay element where you had to play as Emily, but you could like only walk towards the sound of Grace's voice or something. But no, that never happened. And yeah, there's just a lot of I don't know, just so much of Grace screaming and panicking, and that's fine. It just sounds like sometimes you're in a slasher movie rather than a horror or a thriller movie. Uh, yeah, it's just the kind of vibe I get. Yeah, and in terms of the gameplay, it's very fine. It's kind of like what we've come accustomed to. You have puzzles, healing, ammo, crafting. Crafting system isn't too crazy, except for one thing that just, I mean, whatever, it works, but it's really funny that the one new resource they've introduced in this game is infected blood. So every time, or almost every time you kill a zombie, it'll leave behind this puddle of blood. And Grace gets this thing called, the blood extractor or the hemoglobin extractor, and she's able to basically suck up this blood and use it for like synthesizing stuff, and it's her main ingredient really. And it's funny to me that the very first thing it says to do with this is that using blood and scraps you can just make bullets out of that for some reason. And it makes sense for the game, but it makes no real world sense. I just thought it was really funny that we're just making blood bullets out of almost nothing. It's like, okay, whatever, sure. In terms of enemy variety, there's also spiders, dogs. Well, unfortunately, there's only dogs. Well, I'd say honestly, fortunately, there's only dogs in the motorcycle sequence because I hate the dogs in Resident Evil. Every Resident Evil game, doesn't matter which one it is, they're the most annoying enemy. So, for better or for worse, I mean, they're just not in the game. One section of it. Of course, I said liquors. There's also a new enemy type? Question mark. Where there's this one section near the end where Leon has to fight Umbrella soldiers, and it's fully just human on human, like bullet firefight, and it feels very kind of realistic. Like you'll get like sprinkled with a few bullets from across the room, and you'll lose a ton of health. So it's a very different experience. And as far as I know, I can't think of any other Resident Evil where you're actually like fighting other people or like a SWAT team from Umbrella, but I'm sure there's some example out there somewhere, but that was very new to me, and it was fun though. It was a lot of fun, I'll admit. You have this whole section where you can shoot these canisters that release gas, and it blinds the enemies, so you can either run away to a new position or you can charge in there and attack them with your hatchet, which is a lot of fun. Oh my god, there's this one section where there's just one commando. Well, they call him the commando, but basically I just refer to him as Hunk because, as far as I know, Hunk in the Resident Evil lore is just some guy with a nondescript, umbrella camo pattern or get up, and he basically he's just the best for some reason. And so this guy, he basically has a 1v1 hatchet fight with Leon, and it is peak. It is so much fun. It is so short though, but it is absolutely fantastic, and I am so happy they included it in the game. It's just great. I love it. And the other thing too, I was really unfortunate that even in the event where Zeno doesn't inject himself, you cannot fight him. Like you're not even given the opportunity. He just kills Leon in a cutscene, and it's just like, oh, okay, bad ending, great, whatever. But I was really looking forward to have a Wesker fight because in 5 it was just so hype for some reason, and like Chris and Wesker only appear in like one game, the first game, and then yeah, I guess later in some of the spin-offs, but like me going to Resident Evil 5, not knowing who Wesker is, I still felt the hype. I felt the build-up. It is such a great feeling and a mainline thing. And this whole idea that there's this guy who will dodge every bullet unless you land a few decent shots on him and then manually hand feed him an RPG rocket as the only way to defeat him. It's just such a hype scenario, and I wanted that same kind of feeling here, and unfortunately, we just did not get that fight. You can kind of feel it near the end of the game. It felt a little bit rushed, a little bit, I would say, where Some of the sections just aren't as long as you'd like. For example, like as Raccoon City, it reminds me of like the first area in the first Resident Evil 4, from like the village up to the castle. It just feels so good. Or the castle itself, for example. But it feels like a whole section. This section after that, where you're kind of going underground, you're finding a plant thing, and then you're doing the secret lab, that feels like half a level, if that. And so again, it just feels like they ran out of time. And God, I just want more Leon levels. I want more Resident Evil 4. Um, and again, one of the greatest games ever made. So that's kind of like the main kind of ending thing that I was kind of left with Resident Evil 9, is that like the Leon sections are fantastic, they're great, and the Gray sections just in comparison they suck. I guess if they were left on their own, they'd be fine, like a 6 out of 10 game. But in comparison to the Leon sections, they just bring down the overall experience. If it was only Leon sections, this game would be a 9 out of 10. It would be an 8, yeah, and unironically, an 8 or a 9 out of 10. They are just so fantastic. I just wish the game, I, I I wish that they just did the same length of game, but only Leon, and it would have been just so much better. Uh, so yeah, unfortunately, that's the state of thing. Still a great overall game, but again, that first half, I hate to be one of those people that says, "Oh, it gets better later on." It legitimately gets better later on. Not that Grace is terrible or anything. It just by comparison, it's just night and day. It's so painful to go back to Grace after you've been playing for Leon for an extended period. And in fact, you do. There's this one section near the end where they force you to play as Grace in a flashback. So it's like you're a child and you're doing this horror thing where there's other evil children in this orphanage out to get you. And it's so cliche. It is so cliche. It's so wait for the evil thing to walk by, hide under the bed. It feels like an interactive cutscene. You just can't do anything. And so that's my thing. If I were to approach this and try to make this game work while still maintaining or keeping the Grace sections in, I would give Grace way more options. I would give you the option to, I don't know, like crawl into vents, or give you way more distraction devices, or be able to hide under certain things. But when you're going through a level and you're in a room with like 20 different objects, and only one of them has a button prompt for you to hide, you just know, oh, okay, that's where I have to hide. There is very little player choice in most of Grace's levels, besides the puzzle ones. Some of them, again, just feel like interactive cutscenes that you just have to like go through. And yeah, it's just really unfortunate. So yeah, I would fix it by giving Grace way more, not exactly combat options, but different gadgets or devices to help her distract the enemies. I mean, if Leon has, God, like 20 different types of weapons to kill things, Grace should have 20 different types of things to distract things or hide or something. Or maybe she should have like active camo. I don't give her a Metal Gear Solid loadout for that matter. And on that note, by the way, Leon, his greatest strength and his greatest weakness, again in every game, is his inventory. And the fact that they, even in the middle of his campaign, they give you way more weapons than you can actually fit in your inventory. And it's very strange to me because Grace has a storage box where she can store her things and her resources and keep them for later, but Leon does not. Like, if your inventory gets full or you buy a weapon that just barely fits and you fully upgrade it, you can't, and you need to make room, you can't store it anywhere. You just have to sell it, which I guess encourages more playthroughs, but it kind of sucks. I mean, it is nice though that when you sell a weapon, it sells for the exact same amount that you buy it for. So it's like, okay, that's kind of fair. But if you spend, like, if a weapon costs 5,000 points and you spend 30,000 upgrading it and you sell it, those upgrades are gone, I'm pretty sure. So you can't really fully play around with your arsenal. You kind of have to farm a bunch of points, and then fully upgrade something and play around with it. And if you don't like it, you have to reload your last save. So that's how you got to play it. And then again, like there's only so many things you need for the amount of zombies you have to kill. I wish there was more level, more zombies, etc. Um, uh, for example, you get like three, like in the base game, you get three different kinds of shotguns, two different, machine guns, two different snipers, two different pistols, and you feel like you don't really get to use or get to try everything. The fact you have three different shotguns, one of them is like an accuracy shotgun. If you fully upgrade it, it's just kind of like okay, like it felt kind of I don't know how to describe it, but like the base shotgun is the only shotgun that you can upgrade to have a wider spread, which is the point of a shotgun. And like I tried the other new shotguns, there's the police style and the other one, and I was just like, okay, but like what's the point of this? The base shotgun is the best. So it's like, all right, whatever. There's also charms you can find, which you can add to your weapons, and that kind of enables them to essentially have more firepower, accuracy, etc. And so by the end of my first playthrough, I'd fully upgraded all of my weapons from the revolver to the hatchet to the weapons I wanted to use. And yeah, I was like, okay, perfect. And then even when you beat the game, you have like special CP points, which are from like achievements or whatever. And so if you do all these achievements, you can use those points to buy special weapons to encourage new playthroughs, new game plus, etc. So Leon gets, different revolvers, a new shotgun, new submachine gun, all this other stuff. And Grace gets like a special knife and a special pistol, like an automatic weapon for once. So that's kind of nice. Yeah. So yeah, I'm just craving more Leon. Like I'm literally craving it. I wish there was a mercenaries mode I could sink my teeth into right now. And this is maybe the downfall of playing new games when they first come out, is that either they're unfinished or they need patches or they need more content. But man, I want to experience more of this game. So it's good, but it's good with obviously the caveats that I listed. The other thing I should mention, speaking of the weapons in this game, that the main kind of weapon in this game is a magnum that Leon has that has been featured in the cutscenes and whatever in the trailers. But I didn't realize this, that the revolver itself is called the Requiem, and it is the coolest thing ever. So it's the one thing that so in Grace, she has like these bottles for distraction, a pistol, but she also is given Leon's revolver, and it is massively damaging. And it's so funny to see her hands hold like her self-defense pistol versus the giant revolver. It's like comical how big it is. And it goes into the description of it that it even has a low barrel and like a higher chassis on the top, just to reduce knockback because it's so powerful. And it's like 1.27 by 55 millimeters, so that's like a 55 caliber gun, which is just comical at that point. Like most like Desert Eagles are 50 cal, so this is I believe that's how it works, like 50 AE, that's 50 caliber, right? Anyway, so it's just a ridiculously large gun, and it's ridiculously loud and powerful. And looks, but yeah, not much else to say about this one. It's a great game. It could have been even better, and I am sure they're out of mercenaries mode or something that is a lot more fun. But this is one of the first games in a long time that I think feels kind of like a proper sequel to Resident Evil 4. I mean, after 4 we got 5, which was kind of a crisp game, and it still had the same elements, but it was a little bit different, a different atmosphere and attitude. 6 was just a weird thing. 7 was also a kind of weird thing, but 6 was just, at least it was better than, honestly. And then 8, they try to bring back Chris and like kind of like the village, kind of like Resident Evil 4. So it's kind of like still chasing that idea. But this is the one where Leon is back. He is like exactly what you would want from that experience. And so in one form or another, you're getting a taste back again of Resident Evil 4 and just the greatness of what that game was. But yeah, no, that's pretty much it for this one. I hope to see more. Anyway, guys, I'll see you later.